So what is wrong with the Vikings defense? Let's get into the real specifics. I want to really try to drive down at the actual cause here and maybe what can be done about it. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun, coming to you from the bunker where I am in. If you're watching this on YouTube, the backdrop's a lot different, the framing's a lot different. That's because the Vikings lost their third game. So now I'm, of course, preparing for the end times. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast on Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today is the one that I kind of hinted at a whole bunch on yesterday's show on the defense. And I talked, there's like a lot of like longer conversations and things that we have to get into a lot of detail. I want to try to get into that detail with you. Now, it's going to be really hard to do that because this is an audio format. And as you can tell, I'm also not in my usual setup. So I'm going to be as descriptive as possible. If you want a better like visual, check out Patreon later in the week. I'm going to do something very similar, but there's a couple of things that I think are plaguing the defense. One is solvable, and I actually think the Vikings are sort of trending in a way I want them to be. The other one, I think we have to muse about. All right, we're going to do a run defense and a pass defense. We'll start with the run defense thing. So run fits. All right, run fits are really hard. Okay, it's like not an easy thing to describe because it's not what you would see if you play a lot of like Madden or what you would kind of think. You've got a whole bunch of players and they're all responsible for a gap, and if the run goes to your gap, you're the guy to get it, right? Sometimes it can play out that way, but that's not really how run fits work. There are two different kinds of ways to defend the run that I'm going to talk about today. And they're both Fangio tree defenses. If you go to the Fangio tree, you've got like Vic Fangio himself, and then off of his tree, there's Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley and Ed Donatel are doing the same thing in the run game, and Vic Fangio did it a little bit differently. There are absolutely pros and cons to both of these, by the way. Definitely never going to say one thing is better than the other. I think if you try to make that argument, that's a little bit of hubris. But what I will say is for the talent that the Vikings have, I think they might be using the wrong one. So the difference I'm talking about is box fits versus spill fits. That's the word I know for it. I've seen a billion other words for it. So if you call it something else, totally valid. But the difference I'm talking about is the way the edge rushers play the run. And in particular, when it's power, when there's a puller. The key difference between the way Vic Fangio defenses and Brandon Staley defenses fit the run, and we're in the Staley side for this one, is whether the edge rusher attacks the outside or the inside shoulder. In a box fit, the edge rusher will go upfield. There'll be a lever defender. Real quick, vocab lesson. Lever, spill, force. Lever means you are attacking upfield. You're attacking the outside shoulder, and your goal is to contain the running back and force him back to the inside. Spill is kind of the opposite. You're attacking to the inside. You're trying to stay very tight, and you're trying to essentially deny space so that the running back has to bounce outside forever and ever and ever. And it takes longer to do that. And the defensive backs can get involved more easily because the run has to take so long going east-west. That's the general lever, spill, lever, right? And then you have the force, which is the outermost guy. His job is like full contain. A lot of times that's a corner. Sometimes that can be an edge rusher or a nickel corner or something like that, depending on the coverage. The force is very similar to lever, but it's like his job is just contain, and the run getting to the force is getting to the fourth player and the fourth player having to make a tackle is not necessarily as common, because usually the running back will see that guy and turn the run back inside. And that's the goal. That's where you want to be. When you're trying to turn somebody back inside, go upfield. When you're trying to spill somebody to the outside, stay tight. That's the super 101 overly basic lesson. The Fangio box fits use more, have the edge rushers levering. They're going upfield. They're trying to play outside. They're trying to curl you back in, force every run back to the inside, and make it go right back into the meat grinder. You want to run the ball, you have to get through Harrison Phillips to do it. That's the guy we want this to come down to. Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson. Get through those guys, right? Spill fits, which is what Staley does, which is spill and kill, is we're going to make a huge mess of the inside. We're going to basically make it so that you cannot run north-south at all, and we're going to try to spill everything east-west and have our linebackers and our defensive backs give them time to come in and clean up. The Vikings are running the Staley kind, the spill kind, and they're doing less of this. Now, I don't think this works. The reason that it works so well for Staley in Los Angeles and for the Rams, I have to specify the Los Angeles team. That's so annoying. Get hired by a different team, Brandon Staley. Gosh. The reason that it worked so well for him with the Rams was because he had Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald specifically, who could just be in the backfield, and all running backs could ever do was bounce that thing to the outside, try to run away from Aaron Donald, and you could kind of hang your hat on that. Going into the Chargers, it's been a bit more of a struggle for them too, doing it this way. And while the Vikings have Darius Smith and Neil Hunter, like, these are great players. I mean, Fangio, when he was in his heyday as the Broncos coach, had Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, I mean, superstars, right? But he would still do the box fits. He wouldn't do the spill thing. I think that the spill fits idea, which is sort of coming in vogue, got a lot of popularity because Aaron Donald did a whole bunch of stuff and everybody copied that scheme. I think that's what I'm learning here. And that might be like a scorching hot take. But the Vikings are running it that way. Now, against the Lions, they ran box fits a lot more often. They did it the old Fangio way. And every time they did it that way, it was pretty good. And then when they tried to spill things outside, they would kind of get gashed. There's only like one or two real run plays that like super gashed them, if you ask me. I think the problems came more in coverage. So I think that, like, I'm encouraged. I think that is a step in the right direction for the Vikings defense. And if they can continue that transition and be fully transitioned into a more stout run defense that asks more of Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson and asks less of, for example, Jordan Hicks, I'd be pretty happy with that. Problems exist in coverage, and that is a more difficult thing to talk about, and I don't know if there's a good solution to it. And I know that's sort of like, well, that's sort of like doom, right? Like, well, I guess that's it. But sometimes problems don't have solutions, and I'll get into it before I do too much more like prefacing, but I don't feel great about it. Will suffice to say. Before I get into that, though, hey, look, it's hiring season, okay? LinkedIn Jobs is the place to go to get your job filled, okay? The new year's coming up, and you're going to start to have to, replace people that left or whatever, or maybe you're expanding for 2023. Whatever your small business has, hiring is a very high stakes decision. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. Just go to LinkedIn Jobs and add your job posting. They have all sorts of simple tools like screening questions and stuff. It is insanely easy and intuitive. Just go to LinkedIn Jobs and add it. And you can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to talk to you about some new podcasts that are coming out by Audible. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Audible. One that I want to talk to you is called Think Like a Champion. It's hosted by Russell Wilson with a whole bunch of other people like that have championships, Olympic medalists, NFL stars, maybe even business leaders, somebody like Tim Tebow, NCAA champion, and how they found their success, how they maximize their performance, how they think. The path to greatness as told by those who have achieved it. Hosts will swap all kinds of fun stories, and that is available for free on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts. Head on over to Locked On Presents. Just look that up for a sneak peek of Think Like a Champion or catch the full series available anywhere you get your podcast. Available everywhere now. Audible, get in the game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Again, check out Patreon for more like visuals on this. The Patreon video I just put out is about the run game. If you're curious about like, oh man, why do we give up all those tackles for loss? Just did that too. Also check out Locked On Sports Today for your second listen. That is a full all sports show, just like this one, daily podcast, but it's talking about the wide world of sports. So we're going to talk about the defense. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm involving a cat. I'm at a friend's place right now, and the cat is very good. So we are going to bring the cat. So subscribe to YouTube. Sometimes there's a cat, and very often there's rabbits. So the defense is bad. You may have noticed that may have crossed your periphery if you're eagle-eyed. The defense has really been struggling. So, okay, what's wrong? Well, they give up a lot of stuff over the middle of the field. And here is the problem with the way the defense is playing. They don't have the dudes to do what they need to do. I'll tell you that, like, a lot more about what I mean by that, but that's it in a sentence. They do not have the horses to do what they need to do, and that sucks. And the biggest problem is at cornerback. Patrick Peterson has had a great year, and I think part of the great year that Patrick Peterson has had is that they're having him play a lot of quarters. They're having him play in two sometimes. They are not asking him to be a man cover guy so often that the age and the speed and stuff get exploited. And I think the way the Vikings play quarters and halves, quarter, half, I've been talking about it all year. If you've been listening to the show, you know what I mean by that. Cover 6, you may know it as. The way that they play that has a very particular exploit that to stop, your linebackers have to be Superman. And offenses know this. So offenses are coming into games essentially saying, okay, Jordan Hicks has to have the best game of his life or we're going to throw over the middle against you all day. And, well, he doesn't have the best game a linebacker has ever. I mean, he has to do like prime Ray Lewis stuff. Like, it's insane. So what ends up happening is in those quarter, half structures, you're going to have most of that describes how the defensive backs approach it, how, what Cameron Dantzler's doing, Bynum, Harrison Smith, Peterson, those guys, Metellus, whatever. And those guys will play some kind of deep. Those guys will be responsible for matching things. Those guys will be responsible for a lot of the deep stuff, a lot of the outside stuff. The middle of the field is going to be covered by linebackers and brackets a lot of the time in those coverages. It's not universal. Nothing is. There's some coverages where it's different and stuff. So don't let my oversimplification, because I've got to get this in a reasonable amount of time. Don't mistake that for me forgetting about like this variant or that variant. But by and large, the way the Vikings end up when they're in their, they'll call it an 8 look, like a stuff 8 or a nickel 8. When they're in that look, the linebacker's job will be to read the quarterback and then read route concepts and then read the quarterback. And their eyes are very influenced by the quarterback. They're watching the quarterback's eyes and they're flowing with where the quarterback is looking. So they're really easy to look off. It's just the way that the defense works makes it very easy. If you have a quarterback that can look off a linebacker and widen that linebacker out by reading some, dragon concept, slant flat, to the front side. Maybe you're gonna read that, right? You're gonna have slant flat, and you say, I'm not gonna do that. The linebacker will widen out a ton because your eyes are all the way over to that side of the field, and then somebody coming over the middle is going to be wide open. They just kill you with it all the time. Is that a scheme issue or a personnel issue? I don't know. Maybe the linebacker shouldn't be widening that much. Maybe they're getting yelled at in the linebacker room after every time, going, God, why are you widening out that much? I don't know. I wouldn't think so, but I'm not going to say that with a lot of confidence. But I would guess that the linebackers are doing what they're coached to do here, and what they're coached to do here is very easy to manipulate. The answer to that Coverages that don't have the linebackers in that position are middle of field close coverages. That's cover 1 and cover 3. Thing about cover 1 and cover 3, in both instances, your outside cornerbacks are pretty much going to be responsible for every vertical route that can come at them. If they're in cover 1, there's man covering somebody, right? So that's pretty simple. And then if they're in cover 3, they've got a deep third responsibility, and you're zoning off a deep third. That means anything that comes into the deep spot, you're going to be responsible for, and you need to be a pretty good player to be a cover 3 corner. I don't think Peterson and Dantzler are good enough for that, according to the Vikings. Or at least, let me say that a different way. I don't think the Vikings have confidence in Dantzler and Peterson. They certainly don't have confidence in Dantzler or in Duke Shelley and Patrick Peterson. So if you have a backup corner in and you need to get Duke Shelley, like maybe you could have gotten away with this with a Caleb Evans, and they did try a little bit when Evans came in the Washington game. They did do this a little bit, and I thought Evans played admirably in that role. But not when it's Duke Shelley and Andrew Booth, right? And that means they have to live in this world. If the corners can't take the burden, the linebackers are. And to make the play, the linebackers have to make. They'll have to make that read, widen all the way out to like the numbers, turn with perfect footwork, sprint their way back to where the ball is going over the middle of the field, lay out, make a pass breakup. It'd be the craziest play you've ever made. And they would have to make it 9 times a game to actually have this defense in a decent way. It's just too much to ask of them. But to change it so you're asking less of them, you're going to start asking more of the corners, and that could end up being even worse. So I don't know what the solution is. Next year, the solution could be, hey, maybe Dantzler takes a step forward. Hey, everybody's going to be in the scheme for a little bit longer, so we won't have all of this. There's a lot of reading going on, like with Kendricks in particular. Reading and reacting, that all of that, I gotta influence, like I have to react to the eyes, and then I have to react to the route concept, and then I have to react to the eyes again. Watch Eric Kendricks' eyes in this next game. Like, just pick a drive that you're just going to watch Eric Kendricks' eyes for. They're everywhere. He's reading everything. He's looking at this and then that and then this and then that. And there's so many things to process. By the time he's actually breaking on what he's supposed to break on, it's already happened. That will go away in time. Okay. Eric Kendricks is a smart player. He's not just not getting it. It will go away in time. And being in your first year, it's just going to be a little bit slower. Who's great in there for, like, if you talk to people in like the world of business, it's like, yeah, after about your first 6 months is when employees really start to get their rhythm. We've been doing this since August. We're not even there, right? Give them another off season to sort of lick their wounds, give them a camp. And I think there will be an improvement. And that's why I'm going to advocate for a lot more continuity next year than I think a lot of you people are going to be comfortable with. But for now, it might just be choosing the lesser of two evils. So let's brainstorm some stuff. All right. We'll talk about what I think the Vikings can do. And we'll just throw out some ideas for what they can possibly do. And they have a few weeks here against some pitiful offenses. I mean, we're talking this Jeff Saturday Colts mess. We've got the Packers, or whatever whatever state they'll be by week 17, the Bears, whatever state they'll be by week 18. We've got some pretty bad offenses to test stuff out against. So I do think the Vikings are in a position where they have the luxury of figuring this problem out before they actually have to play a real boy team in the playoffs. I honestly think if I had to choose right now, I would say the Vikings have played their last playoff team till the actual playoffs. But and I don't know, we shall see, right? Maybe I'm wrong about the Giants, but at any rate, we'll see if we can brainstorm some solutions, right? Because I don't want to just sit here and complain. But first things first, let me talk to you about a good old Gramble. BetOnline is your one-stop shop for all things Grambling. You can bet on the final bits of the World Cup. You can bet on, of course, football. The Vikings are, I think, as it stands on BetOnline, last I looked at least, they were 4.5-point favorites against the Colts. So you can bet that line if you think it's too high or too low, or if you just want to do a little emotional hedge. I do that all the time, where I get really worried if the Vikings are going to lose. So I'll bet on the other team just so that, well, at least I got something if they lose, right? It helps. Okay. It helps. That is, once again, betonline.net, where the game starts. So to wrap up this conversation about what is wrong with the defense, here's the deal. Like with run fits, I think that I think they've found a pitch that's a little better than what they've been doing for a lot of this year. And I think it's a good thing. I think the answer is just, okay, do that more. And it seems like that's what they did in the Lions game. I would love to see them continue that. But the coverage problem is, do you want this game to be decided by Jordan Hicks or Duke Shelley? Neither answer is very good, right? I guess you pick Jordan Hicks, but you're not going to be happy about it. So what do we do? I've been saying for a little bit that, hey, once Brian Asamoah is ready, I think that's going to be a really big improvement because Brian Asamoah is just so darn fast and he's just got so much of the like point the missile and launch it kind of thing that linebackers in this scheme tend to need. But I mean, as smart as Eric Kendricks is, Asamoah is a rookie and he's not coming from a scheme like this. And by the way, while we're at it, there's a lot of talk about like the rookies, right? Andrew Booth was always going to need a year. I knew that. We knew that before the draft. If you listen to me before the draft, it's like, yeah, this guy's probably going to need a red shirt. He's got some stuff to clean up. But there's this potential, this sky high ceiling. So with Andrew Booth, whether that was a good pick or not, I don't think you can say at all until we have a sense for, did he actually find that ceiling? Did he find that potential? And you're never going to see that year one. If you expected that, you're off the reservation. But the thing with Lewis Cine, he wasn't starting for his first 4 weeks, right? He was a special teamer. I think he would have, but also he's making the same transition everybody else is for everything. I mean, everybody like Harrison Smith is slow because of this. You're kidding me? Like a rookie? Dude was wearing braces. He's a kid. That's going to take some time. That's fully understandable and to be expected. And I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling now, but people who are writing him off because he didn't start week one when he's learning a brand new scheme, he was going they run what Zimmer ran in Georgia. He's making the exact same transition. That's going to take time. You just do not get that down after 3 weeks of camp. It's way too much. I digress. Hopefully those players can have a little bit more of an impact next year as well. And you can get to a point where, yeah, we can ask the linebackers to make some crazy plays because they know when, the route concept is something they actually have to widen out for, and they know how to stay home a little better. And their zone drops are a little bit more consistent and all that stuff. It's footwork that they're just not, they've been doing something else for 8 years. But so hopefully that's a year 2 thing. That's a next year thing. And hopefully it seems like there is a decent chance that this just sort of works itself out. I know that's really scary. And I know that's like a kind of a tough sell that, hey, see this problem, do nothing about it and it will go away, is like not the best life advice. But I kind of feel like if they just do nothing, it might go away. Like that. I like the odds of that, right? Or at least they will have a better repertoire of tools that they can call in coverage, right? They can maybe go into cover one a little bit more if they can get something better at cornerback. Is a disaster going into the offseason. It's like a DEFCON 1 need. So, we'll panic about that later, though. That's a different thing. For the meantime, I want to see them try to get cover 3 a little bit more consistent. They did something really interesting in this Lions game with Josh Metellus. No Harrison Smith, right? So you have Josh Metellus. And a whole bunch of times they actually called inverted coverages on that side of the field. They didn't do full-on invert coverages, and invert coverages are a pariah. People hate invert coverages. If you talk to like D-backs coaches, if you talk to people who are like film junkies, they hate inverted coverages. And what I mean by inverted coverages is take like cover 2. So you'll have like a deep half safety and then a corner playing underneath. And then one time you'll call it where the safety plays underneath and the corner plays the deep half. And you're sort of subverting it to try to catch the quarterback off guard. Some of the most egregiously ugly defensive lowlights have come from invert coverages. Like there is a reason to hate them. But the Vikings were kind of doing that. And they were actually having Josh Metellus rotate down before the snap to try to do some aggressive stuff, get involved in the run game. And I think that was going to be Harrison Smith doing that against the Lions. And you kind of gave him the ability to like be a game record. I thought Metellus did an okay job with those assignments, but obviously he's not going to be Harrison Smith, right? Really interesting idea. They tried some more stuff in this game, and a whole bunch of it didn't work. They got killed in cover one a whole bunch of times. They got killed in cover three for a long touchdown. They spent a lot of the game in just quarters, so they didn't do their usual cover six thing. They did actual quarters, or they'll call it tricks, where usually you'll have like one safety on the weak side of the play that can kind of poach something on the other side, that can kind of say, there's less guys over here, I'm going to help you where there's more guys. And they called that tricks call, is where you both safeties could do that depending on what happens in this play. And that gives you a little more flexibility, but it also opens you up for guys to misread and make mistakes and nail down on something they weren't supposed to nail down on. Hence the Jameson Williams touchdown, where Cameron Bynum, he was trying to intercept something and he let something run behind him that I think he was supposed to take. So you run some extra risks, but there's more creative stuff. I know the seas are a little bit choppy, but stay the course. I think that sort of stuff, I don't want them to shy away from it and go back to the defenses they were calling against like Philadelphia, where it was just the same thing all the time. I think they're folding stuff in that can be really, really effective if they just screw it up a little less. And hopefully they've got 4 games to learn how to screw this stuff up a little less. And then by the time you actually get to the playoffs, we'll have something that we have not seen from the Vikings this season yet that can be a huge boon, which is a multiple defense, because they have not been multiple yet. They tried to be multiple against the Lions and they screwed it up a bunch. So a multiple defense that doesn't screw up a bunch. If you can get to that by the playoffs, I think there's a chance that we solve this. And then when we get to 2023, however this season ends, when we get to 2023, then we can start to talk about living in a very multiple place. And this can get really cool as long as we have the patience and the persistence to take it to where it needs to go. I hope that makes sense. Especially a lot of people, especially in the YouTube comments, but even people like DMing me and stuff, really upset that I like don't want to fire Ed Donatel. And that's because this is still a work in progress. And I am not going to fire somebody over how bad their work in progress looks. I'm going to let it realize what it's supposed to be. And then if that sucks, then we can talk about it. And I don't know. I think if they try more stuff that they did in this Lions game, and if they run that kind of stuff back, and if they can pull it off without screwing it up this time, I do think this defense can actually have a lot more tools and start to pull back on that whole like 5 games, 400 yards in a row. Maybe I'm totally wrong, though. Maybe they'll give up 40 yards and lose that to like Daniel Jones and lose in the first round of the playoffs. Who's to say, right? We'll talk about all that. Tomorrow's crossover Thursday. We'll talk to Locked On Colts about whatever's going on over there. And that's going to be a fun conversation. And then, of course, Friday we'll do our bold predictions and stuff. I am going to be in this weird setup at least tomorrow again, and maybe even for Friday's episode, we'll see. So thank you so much for your patience with that and your patience with what may become an erratic posting schedule again as I'm traveling. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.